Hello and welcome to this video on the WORNG Electronics Acronym, a highly stable and highly capable through zero analog VCO. Let's check out what's to come. This video is sponsored by WORNG Electronics. Now Acronym is a 12 HP analog oscillator with through zero phase modulation, 2 subs, waveform morphing. It's highly stable over 8 octaves even under heavy modulation, and it really excels at just these kind of big, rich, chewy monster kind of harmonics. I'm really going to kind of lean into that in this video, but you'll also find that it will do much cleaner, so stable and clean that it's almost digital sounding, kind of Chowning DX, kind of Yamaha style FM phase mod type sounds. We're going to use Acronym along other modules such as Parallax for filtering, Vertex as a VCA. We're going to use the MidSide Plus to take this out into stereo, as WORNG Electronics have definitely got a reputation as pushing stereo as a concept in modular, and their ideas about using this with multiple outs in MidSide create some fascinating stereo images. And I'm going to drop in some no talking patches between the ones that I explain, just as a way of kind of piling more patches of music into the video. Let's take a look at the features and then we'll get into those patches. So running down the features top to bottom, we have a tune and a fine tune, an LED that shows us the status and frequency of Acronym, which comes off of the subs, so it's a bit easier to see the rate of. Higher tunings would just keep that lit. We have a volt per octave. We have a hard sync, which syncs the negative portion of the wave. We have a through zero phase modulation and its incoming socket there. And then we have this wave morphing section where we can morph between waves manually, CV modulate with an attenuverter, and we can blend a sub into this wave morphing as well. We have a sine wave output, which is always just a sine, a triangle. Sub 1 is down 1 octave from the main tuning, and it's this hybrid saw square style wave that you'd find on, say, a TB303. Sub 2, 2 octaves lower, and this wave morphing that morphs through a triangle to a square to a saw wave, and then into this folded wave. As I say, you can blend a sub into this. If I tune a little higher, we can blend that sub into that waveform too. It's all analog. We can get some really chewy, monstrous kind of morphing, self-patched harmonics out of this thing. It's been really interesting to work with. Patch examples are on screen, so without further ado, let's dive in. So here we're going to look at a feedback trick to create these huge and dynamically animating sounds right out of Acronym. We're simply listening to a single waveform there. And it sounds massive with lots of animation. Let's strip it back and we'll build back to this. So here we're listening to the wave output, which as we've seen, we can shift the waveform of, add some sub into, and that's certainly an interesting way to shift and animate your sound around. However, if we patch sub 2 back into the through 0 phase modulation, really lovely tonal shift, and it does kind of click into like a harmonic lock-in at higher settings there, and this works right across all these different waves. There's this really lovely sub feedback shift that works with sub 1 as well. Can add some sub level into the actual blend of this wave as well. But I really like sub 2 there, that 2-octave difference, giving that bit more grunt in the low end. Now with this sounding as good as it does when we're moving the level of that phase modulation, let's make it dynamic, so feedback with a VCA in between that's being modulated. Let's try some different waves. Oh yeah. Bot octave back in. Sub blended in. Let's animate that wave a bit. Really unique sound with some feedback with a VCA in between, a little bit of animation of the wave, and then throw filters at it and whatever else you want to patch it to. As I say, that's just the sound of Acronym by itself, which is pretty impressive. So in this patch, we're going to explore some simple sine wave on sine wave through 0 phase modulation. Just looking at these more kind of classic bell-like FM tones. So stripping this back and removing the effects, and there's a sine wave as is. Now being through 0 phase modulation, you can be quite freewheeling with your kind of tuning and still get musical results. Nice stable modulated tones. If I start my sequence again, let's play around with the depth of modulation and the tuning. Close my VCA. Almost sounds like the kind of classic Chowning style Yamaha DX FM. Let's go to a high tuning. And even the kind of outer tune, and you can see that beating on the Lysadue there, tones still give a musical result. This is the tuning more locked in, just fine tuning there. Both oscillators playing the same pitch sequence from a buffered mult. See, we get a really stable tone. Some reverb back in. Higher tuning again. And that's just a sine wave on a sine wave. So in this patch we're being dynamic and animating the level of phase modulation with a low pass gate and another oscillator modulating the acronym. A little bit of wave animation as well. Let's pull this back and work back towards this. Now here's acronym being sequenced with volt per octave sequence into vertex, simple VCA and an envelope to control the level of the sound. Here there's some slides and things that we're not hearing because this VCA has been closed. Now I'm going to modulate this with this sound, which is another oscillator into a low pass gate. This is playing the same volt per octave sequence. So all of this sound and it being dynamically modulated is what we're modulating the through zero phase modulation with. We can see that there and here. If you're following the sequencer, it's the accent pattern here. I'm adding a bit of extra modulation to the wave here with another envelope. And one cool trick here, if you're all the way left on this waveform and add some negative modulation, it kind of wraps back around the knob. So I can fade from here, instead of going up slightly, and come back round to this folded tone. Some effects, some drums. I'm hoping it's coming across, but it's really easy to get musical animated sounds, and that's what I'm really enjoying with the acronym. Let's explore audio rate modulation of the waveform morphing. It responds really well to external VCOs, but we're going to start with some patching, some self-patching from the subs into the waveform morphing. The green trace here is the output. They all follow the cable colours. And let's take this blue trace, sub 1 output, and patch that across to morph the wave. Now the start position and the amount of CV will have a big effect here. Because the sub's an octave lower, you kind of get these dual cycle waveforms where the wave repeats but it takes longer to repeat its pattern. Some nice big rich tones. Now patching across the sub 2, that pink trace, same shape but 2 octaves lower. You can see it takes more cycles of the wave to get back to this kind of consistent pattern now. And it's even more kind of monstrous and rich. So I have this sound, the sub 2, up into a mixer, and I'm going to add some LFO to that, so it's a blend of sub 2 and an LFO, which will then act like a slower turning of the knob while this audio rate modulation is happening. There's some really unique, rich tones. Chewy is a word that WORNG use in their manual, Chewy Harmonics, which which I definitely agree with. Now, losing the LFO, let's use an external modulation source, which is another oscillator, the yellow trace there, and a sine wave. Just play with the tuning of this modulation. Really nice sounds, high up audio rate modulation there. Again, mixing that with some LFO. It almost sounds like we're morphing through a more complex wavetable. Let's go back to sub 1. I could listen to this all day. In fact, I have been. I've been listening to this way longer than what's made the edit in the video. So as the subs here have this, quote, 303 like square wave, which was that the Roland TB303, the classic acid machine square wave, wasn't actually a square wave, it's more like a saw-square hybrid. I just wanted to show that quickly and use it as an excuse to make a kind of bit of pseudo acid. Now let's just start by looking at what this sub waveform is. From another oscillator here, the green and yellow traces are a square wave and a saw. I'm sure many of you know what they look like, but just for reference. And then so that we can see and hear this blue wave, the sub output from Acronym, square from another oscillator, saw from another oscillator, the kind of hybrid 303 like Acronym waveform. Now patching that out into the filter there, parallax. I'm certainly enjoying an excuse to make some acidic patching. Let's throw that wave morphing out into the right hand input on this filter here. And throw in our sub 2 to TZPM trick as well. Stick that in your 303. So in this patch, we're going to explore taking the Acronym out into stereo using the MidSide Plus. Let's strip this back, get into this glitchy weirdness, and explore stereo. Now here I have Acronym with the two subs, green and blue traces. These all follow the trace colours and cables here into the mid and side returns on the MidSide Plus, and then the pink and yellow are my left and right outs. Same traces there, just coming into vertex as a stereo VCA. Using MidSide means we're not just mixing them as hard left and right or just mixing them together in mono, which we can do. We get some interesting complementary waves to create a stereo image from the Acronym. As we start to modulate the width of the MidSide module, say of an LFO, we get this expanding and contracting and flipping stereo image. Adding in a pitch sequence. Using MidSide techniques is a really interesting way of taking a mono oscillator, using different waveforms, and creating these rich modulatable stereo sounds. I'm going to add some through zero phase modulation, because the subs respond in a really interesting way. And at this particular tuning of my oscillator that's external that I've plugged in here, I get some almost weird kind of like retro arcade game octave trill type effects. Turning down the VCO and using an envelope. We're creating our own unique stereo images from a couple of waveform outputs. So we're going to look at hard sync, what it is, how it works, and some tips to make the most of it, along with how it sounds. So here's a saw wave from this wave morphing. We're listening to this manually, except for just a bit of volume control as I record it, so I can turn it down while I'm talking. And we're going to plug in this square wave from another oscillator into the hard sync. You can see what happens with hard sync is it actually resets the waveform. If I tune lower, actually lower than what I'm syncing to, you can see it no longer completes a cycle of the wave. These will be much longer because it's resetting before it has a chance to get through that lower pitched wave cycle. As I tune up, we'll start to get through the next cycle of a waveform to jump back up to its reset point. Now if I was to modulate acronym, but not modulate the oscillator that is syncing, you can hear this static pitch from the sync. It's not this moving pitch as this is just by itself. Likewise, if I was to then modulate the syncing source, this green trace square wave, we get a sense of a static waveform from acronym. We can certainly hear the pitch moving with what it's been synced to. With both of these just static again, actually modulating with an envelope is an interesting and common way of shifting through some hard sync tones. So I'll patch an envelope into this through zero phase modulation. Let's get the syncing source, this square wave sequenced again. So definitely try out some patches with the hard sync. So I wanted to see if the acronym could be used as an LFO. With the help of a little negative voltage into the pitch there, it certainly can. Just adding a negative voltage here, we can really slow this down. have multiple outputs into the scope here. I'm modulating the PWM on my oscillator, modulating the filter, the skewing of the filter. These subs don't hold their shit down at this sub audio rate. We actually just get a kind of little click you can see on that pink trace there. And these tiny little click, 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 echoes of kind of ticking and clicking in the patch are coming from that being used to modulate bits of this signal path, including the filtering. That morphing waveform output is being modulated. We're getting these changing wobbles and shifts in filtering and the width of the effects in the MidSide Plus there. You can certainly hear some of those ticks really nicely from those subs. So put a negative voltage into the volt per octave there, and you can get Acronym to be an LFO. If I use this wave output that's wobbling around, just a kind of final bit of feedback and bonus, kind of patching here if you like, patching that into TZPM, we can push up into the audio frequencies and back down again. So here we're going to combine Acronym and the MidSide to create a really sculptable, massive stereo image with some self-patching, audio rate modulation, and all the kind of good things we've been doing for Acronym thrown in for good measure. Now I have the triangle into the left input of the MidSide Plus, and the waveform output, which is the blue trace, green is the triangle, into the right side, and coming out left and right from the MidSide. And if I modulate from mono, we can hear the harmonics kind of ping pong or shift side to side. If I modulate width here on the MidSide with, say, a slow LFO, I have an interesting image that shifts the harmonics from side to side. And we could do that with, say, sub 1 as the left input, and get a sub against the richer wave shifting around. Where this gets really interesting is to use a sub to audio rate modulate this width. With a rich, wide waveform. Let's try sub 2. If we combine that with some self-patching of sub 1 to, say, the waveform morphing, I'm going to mix in some slow LFO with this sub 2 width modulation. With a recipe for making thick, rich, droning waveforms. Let's take all this stereo information and put it into a wider sequenced patch. So here's a more fleshed out patch based on the idea of using sub 2 to modulate the width with the MidSide Plus. Kind of everything else that we've done in this video is going on here. I'm syncing it to another oscillator. I have through 0 phase modulation from another oscillator. I'm using sub 1 to self-patch some waveform morphing. Sub 2, as I say, is modulating the MidSide Plus. Have some effects, filtering, VCA, different envelopes for the filters and VCA. And some rich delay effects, which I remove. And you can hear Acronyms just kind of excelling at tones that would largely be kind of wavetable, digital technology, DXFM style in tone, or at least in how you'd create those tones. And it's handling those really musically with an analog oscillator. So if you got to the end of the video, go drop hard sync in the comments section. And also let me know what your favourite patches were. I'd love to know which ones stood out to you. You can support my work over on patreon.com/DivKid, where you'll gain access to the DivKid Discord community, exclusive videos, store discounts, PDF documents, and much more. Hit like and subscribe, share the video, all the usual end of a video patter that you kind of have to say at the end of a video, kind of. And I'll see you next time. Bye.